Good evening, welcome to Piers Morgan Uncensored. Climate protesters might be pretty irritating, but they undeniably have a serious cause. You could say we saw a bit of that yesterday when we experienced the hottest day in British history, and recorded history anyway, and there was a surge of wildfires right across the country, causing huge damage. So how do these protesters go about winning hearts and minds for their cause? Well, this was campaign group Just Stop Oil's answer today. Activists climbed gantries on the M25, blocking it and causing 9-mile tailbacks, causing, of course, extensive misery for many motorists. The group first made the headlines back in March when they stormed BAFTA's red carpet. Then it was football's turn as they attached themselves by the neck to goalposts. There was also disruption at the British Grand Prix, with protesters having to be physically dragged off the track. In early April, Just Stop Oil managed to literally stop oil, blocking tankers around the country from delivering petrol, causing a week of shortages at the pumps. And recent weeks have seen our guests tonight glue themselves to the Hay Wain at the National Gallery, and others attach themselves to masterpieces by Van Gogh and Turner, as well as The Last Supper. I'm joined now by Just Stop Oil co-founder Hannah Hunt and protester Eben. Welcome to you both. I suppose my reaction to this is that I don't dispute you represent an important cause. Never have done. I believe in climate change. I think it's serious. I think we're seeing the impact of that all through Europe at the moment in a pretty dramatic manner. I guess my problem is the way you're going about this, because I'm not sure you're winning hearts and minds. I think you're actually having the opposite effect. And that's my problem with it. I think the kind of cultural wanton damage, I think, hijacking sporting events, I think the motorway stuff where you're causing huge disruption to so many people, it's, I think, annoying a lot of people more than it's bringing them to you. What do you say?
I mean, so Piers, if you agree that there's this huge issue right now, then you might also agree that no new oil and gas licences, which is what we're asking for, is a no-brainer. It's in line with what the International Energy Agency, the IPCC, the UN are all asking. It's in line with the government net zero targets, right? So that's what we're asking. It's a no-brainer demand. And we have to do whatever we can to force the government to implement this, because otherwise we're on a course bound for, more summers like what we're seeing this week.
Right. I mean, Hannah, the government doesn't seem to be paying much attention to you guys attaching yourselves to paintings or disrupting sporting events or disrupting motorists going about their business, some to very important things.
I mean, the government aren't paying attention to us, and nor are they paying attention to the severity of the climate crisis. I mean, this week, in the hottest week of weather we've seen in British history, on Monday, our UK judiciary ruled that the government's net zero plans for 2050 are unlawful. So the real true criminals here are our government. They don't care about the situation or the severity at all, Piers.
But do you care about the disruption you cause ordinary people who've got nothing to do with this, who are trying to go about their lives, their business, and you're disrupting them? You're causing them a lot of misery. Do you care about them?
I mean, Piers, have you seen the disruption that the heat waves, the fires are literally engulfing houses in London? It's causing... Have you seen the strain to our NHS? They are on a black level alert. Yeah. Have you seen the strain to our fire service? They've had the greatest fallout since World War II.
I'm asking you, though, about the disruption you cause ordinary people who might well support the general cause you're representing, but don't understand why you want to cause them so much distress. Do you understand the distress you're causing some people?
So my personal view, you're asking me about my distress.
No, I'm asking you about the distress
my understanding
you
of the distress.
Other people. Are you aware of quite the scale of the kind of distress you cause when, for example, you bring motorways crashing to a halt?
If we're talking about disruption,
let me finish. That there may be people who are actually trying to get to incredibly important things. Do you care about them?
Piers, come on, look at the situation we're in right now. You know what's happening.
I'm asking you if on a human
is whether this is a proportional response to what is going on.
That wasn't the question. With respect to both of you, I've said I agree with the cause you're fighting for. It's the methodology I have a problem with, and I just wonder whether you have understood.
But you keep, throughout all these interviews that you and other members of the media have with people, you keep throwing out this methodology thing. But if you look,
I just asked you whether you care about the distress you cause people.
Listen, we care about any distress that is caused to anyone. That's what we're trying to prevent in doing this. Because if we don't stop the government opening the 40 new oil and gas fields that they have planned, then the amount of distress and suffering and death that is coming is unimaginable.
So some people's misery is worth preventing other misery? Is that the calculation you've made?
Piers, you're just coming in with these questions again and again.
Well,
And
really.
you know you're going to get the same answers from any of
Eben,
us.
I'm not...
Why don't we talk about the actual
I'm asking you a very
issue that's
specific question because I have another guest here, Amanda Bishop. Amanda, good evening to you.
Good evening.
Where have you come from today?
I've come from my mother's funeral today.
Your mother's funeral.
Yes.
First of all, my deepest condolences
Thank you.
to you and your family
Yeah,
on the
thank
loss
you.
of your mother. Obviously, a hugely important day for your family.
Hugely.
And you wanted to give your mum a great send-off
We did.
and give her the funeral she deserved.
That's right.
How old was she, if you don't mind me asking?
She was 90. She died on her 90th birthday.
So she had an extraordinary life,
She did.
which you wanted to pay proper tribute to today. And
We all did.
And what happened?
We basically got stuck in traffic because of the protests, illegal protests from what I can gather, because unfortunately my mother lived very close to the M25 and that's where the hearse left from. And as a consequence, we were so delayed in traffic that we actually missed our allocated
We're
slot.
seeing the pictures here of the car behind the hearse, showing the hearse stuck in traffic. And as a consequence, you missed your slot.
We missed
and
our
how
slot.
long in the end was your mother's funeral?
A very, very quick 10 minutes. And my mother was a meticulous timekeeper, meticulous.
And I understand her best friend couldn't even get there.
Couldn't even get there. And it caused an enormous amount of issues for us, because, not least because we didn't feel that we could pay her the tribute that we wanted in the time that we did. But we had all the other arrangements that we had for the rest of the day were really put out.
I mean, I understand why young people are concerned about climate change. I understand why they want to protest and so on. I don't understand some of these methods they're using. I don't think they understand the implications and the consequences of what they do. And I think you've just perfectly explained one scenario, which has been repeated, I suspect, many times over today.
Yes.
How do you feel about it when you see the protesters here and they respond the way they do? How do you feel?
OK, well, I'd really like... I hope I would give as balanced a view as I can, because we understand that climate change is a pressing issue. But I think to do the things that you did and to endanger, forgetting all the delays that happened to people today, actually, we got on with our day. You did not disrupt our day at all. You disrupted it, but we still felt that we managed to pay a tribute that we wanted to her. And I'm sure every other driver and everybody else you inconvenienced today felt the same thing. But if I was married to one of those police officers whose lives you were endangering today, I would be less impressed with that, particularly when I can see a tweet from you that you're very happy with all the firefighters risking their lives yesterday and in admiration of them, but on the same token you're allowing police officers, and some people I'm sure would have said you should be able to protest illegally like that, and just someone should have just left you there. And why should we all get disrupted if you are knowing that you are breaking the law?
OK, what's your response?
Firstly, I just want to say I truly am sorry for disrupting your day, and also condolences. I really am sorry. But I want to try and look at the bigger picture here. And the criminals are our government. They're investing in new oil, and these 40 new licences that they plan to open by 2025 is a death project, and they are failing to protect the people of this country, which is their fundamental responsibility.
Well, can I just say, and I hear what you're saying, and I have 3 young children of my own, young adults. And I also understand that actually what you're trying to do when you make change is actually build and bring people with you, and it's a skill to have, a really big skill. And if you don't have that skill, it's either easy to do the things that you're doing to try and get some shock tactics, but actually you're not bringing about change. And even though you might think that the government are the criminals, I at least elected them. And if I don't like them, I can elect them again, either to not be in power or choose somebody else. I didn't elect you, and I don't necessarily agree with your politics.
I mean, Piers has, is it 11-year-old daughter you have? How old's your daughter? And she is voiceless right now. She cannot elect someone in power to choose what her future looks like. And her future, by the time she is my age, there will be drought, there will be food shortages, and worse summers than this one. So, unfortunately, it's for the people that we have to act who cannot vote to elect.
Right, but
someone...
OK, but look, I mean, look, here you have a woman who's tried to say goodbye to her mum, who's 90 years old. It would be the most important day, potentially, you've ever had in your life, I would think. And ends up with 10 minutes, a funeral lasting 10 minutes for her mother. And that's directly because of the Stop the Oil protests, which shut down the motorway. The best friend of her mother couldn't even get there to say goodbye to her great friend. Do you feel any sense of remorse about that when you hear it?
I mean, listen, firstly, my deepest condolences as well. I think the problem is you were talking about electing and re-electing governments, but we don't have the time for that. So if we're talking about the net zero targets that the government have put in place, which the judiciary have just ruled unlawful, that's in 28 years' time. And our country is burning. OK, we've literally seen that this week. We've seen people die because of the heat, and it's just going to get worse. The whole of Europe is burning and is on fire.
And there are ways to make that point. There are ways to make that point.
What we have to do is generate the political will. We're talking about determining how many people are going to die and suffer over the coming decades. We're talking about, what kind of a future your children,
would you
my
replace,
generation are going
would
to
you
have.
Right
because
now?
Our government don't care right now.
I mean, how draconian would you be? Would you cut the oil off right now?
What we're saying is no new oil and gas. So
right.
by the government,
if it was down to you, would you cut it off right now?
No, that would be total chaos. But by the government's own reports, we have 8 years of oil and gas reserves left. That's plenty of time to transition away from that into something that's sustainable and that actually gives our generation a future. I mean, we're already seeing the impacts. This isn't something that's going to happen in 10, 20 years' time. It's happening now.
Do you really think members of the public are going to listen in any way, shape or form to you when you do the acts that you do and you're breaking the law? So how can you give any advice that's compelling or build an argument and bring people into that argument and try and persuade them when you're actually going about...
This is the point. You see, I looked at all the reaction, right, on the news stories, on all the websites. I looked at the social media reaction. It was almost universally hostile towards what you're doing. Not to the cause you represent, but to the methods you're using. It was relentless hostility. You weren't bringing hearts and minds. You were actually driving them away. And that's my problem. I don't think what you're doing is working. I think it's having the opposite effect. It's getting you short-term publicity. It's getting you on shows like this. But when people hear this kind of story, they're like, who the hell are you guys, frankly, to be stopping this lady from going to pay proper tribute to her mother, to holding up a hearse on the way to a funeral so they miss their slot? Who are you to do that? You're deciding what you think is more important, whose lives you think are more important. And I say to you, I'm with you about the cause.
But Piers,
when I hear that,
about
I'm
the
not
lives of every future generation on this planet.
Yeah.
What is more important than every single life?
I think every life is
and
as important. Right?
Exactly, yeah.
Including Amanda's mother.
And we risk losing all of that. All of it. Every life on this planet.
Where does your disruptive tactic stop? And what, you're going to keep gluing yourself to things and stopping sporting events and lying in motorways and so on? Where do you go with this? Do you get ever more extreme? Do you get ever more disruptive? And what do you hope to achieve with it? Because at the moment, I'm not seeing anything.
I mean, listen, until the government make a statement that they won't invest in new oil and gas projects, then we will continue to cause the disruption because that's what history has proven can create the societal change at the speed and scale required.
Some people would argue that's a form of terrorism. You are trying to intimidate the public.
Look at the suffragettes, look at the civil rights
totally
movement.
Different.
It's not...
That is
it's also civil resistance.
The suffragettes were able to build that movement. It was a movement. You're so right. It was a movement of people, and it had a huge, great amount of support for it over a long period of time.
If you think people supported the suffragettes at the time, you're wrong. People hated the suffragettes, like people hated the civil rights movement.
But they still managed to make changes over time. And if somebody did go down with their ship, like Emily Davison, at least she did that. She did that. I don't necessarily agree with what she did, but she did it.
Hannah,
what I object to is you risking the lives of everybody else.
I think a lot of people feel that way. Hannah, I mean, how far do you take your personal accountability? For example, your social media, I'm told, is full of pictures of you in far-flung places having great holidays. I presume you didn't swim there. So you're taking a lot of planes, are you?
I mean, I thought you might bring this up.
Well, we're showing some of the pictures here. I mean, this is you in hot spots around the world, which I presume you've...
Piers, I was a child there. I'm 16.
Do you not fly anymore?
I'm 23. I do not fly
When was your
anymore.
last flight?
I mean, those are photos from when I was 16.
No, it's a straight question. Do you fly anymore or not?
No, I don't fly anymore.
You've stopped flying?
I truly believe that when you know the information and then you can act. It's our moral duty, if we know this information, to determine what the future of humanity is going to look like, and that is push for no new
Part of the problem, again, with the debate is you hear a lot of high-profile celebrities, and they say climate change, carbon footprint, environment. You know, Meghan Markle and Prince Harry, two great examples, and they constantly use private planes. We've seen Kylie Jenner reveal, I think, yesterday, for using one to go 7 minutes. There's actually a guy now doing a website where he monitors the use of private jets, and these Hollywood guys use them literally like cabs. And I suppose the problem with that, again, is if they feel that the people preaching most about this are doing the complete opposite, again, it has the opposite effect. Just annoys people.
Piers, I was a child there, and I think this shows a message that it's never too late. We can turn it around here. We have 2 to 3 years to sort the future of humanity. And I hope that it shows that I can turn this around in, 6 years since that last fight.
If there were people on the motorway today who weren't going to a funeral but actually were prevented from getting to a hospital and died, would you have that on your conscience? I mean, you're all about life. Preserving life.
Look at how many people are dying around the world right now, even in this country. You're talking about hypotheticals, but look at the reality, Piers.
The reality is...
You're a respected and experienced journalist.
I agree.
Look at the reality of what is happening.
It wasn't the question...
Why are we talking hypotheticals?
Because you never answer the question I ask you. And I think you should. You should be more direct. My question was, if there are people literally losing their lives because you bring motorways to a standstill and they can't get urgent medical treatment, how do you feel about that? Because you're all about apparently preserving life and you may be costing life. Is that a price worth paying for you?
Listen, we don't want to inflict suffering on anybody,
right?
Of course.
But you are doing that.
There have been no incidents where that's happened to somebody. So you're talking pure hypotheticals.
Yeah, I am.
When people are actually already dying.
I'm saying it's highly likely that's going to happen if you carry on. That's the point. And my question is...
What's even more likely...
Are you prepared to take the risk?
The 3.5 billion people who are currently in danger because of the climate crisis. That's not highly likely. That's certain. Those 3.5 billion people are in danger. 1 billion people are on the verge of starvation in India and Pakistan.
So you're going to keep going?
Right now.
You're going to keep going with these protests?
Yeah.
And you think it's going to bring people around and get them on your side?
It's not about bringing people around. You know, people can see the terror and the horror of what's going on right now. And people can... And, you know, you say we've lost support. We've actually got quite a lot of support from these things. You know, after the Hay Wain action that we did, we had the school where the Hay Wain's based reaching out to us, the head teacher asking us to come in to talk to their children.
Gluing yourselves to masterpieces isn't going to save the world. You might think it does, but it's not going to. It's just not going to. People just go, look at these idiots. They glue themselves to paintings. They don't think, I must go and join the cause.
Do you know what the suffragettes did as part of their tactics? They slashed the Rokeby Venus, and actually, about 5 minutes before we went and did that, we walked in the room next door and we looked at the Rokeby Venus. So you're saying that these tactics work, but you're also saying that you admire and respect what the suffragettes have done.
I didn't say that. I didn't say that at all, actually. What I said was, what I object to is you comparing yourself to a movement that might be entirely different. I'm simply objecting to anybody who does any illegal activities that endangers life, whether it's somebody who's trying to get to...
activity as well.
What about targeting China and India, who are the main polluters in the world? Well, you laugh, but have you been over there? Do you try and protest there? No, you don't, because you'd be locked up, right? So my point is, what is the UK is like 1% of the problem. China's 33% of the problem. India, massive whack of the problem. Why don't you guys take your protest to where the real... This is my problem with people like Greta Thunberg. I don't see her marching around Beijing. And that would have far more effect to me if you guys got on a plane and went and did all this stuff and tried to disrupt China and India. That would make probably far bigger global headlines, but you won't do it because it's too difficult.
What we can do is make change in our country, and other people around the world...
But changing our country isn't going to change the bigger picture.
If our government opens one new oil and gas project, they've failed the net zero targets, which we've already established are unlawful.
I think you
They're
really
planning
have
40.
a strong
Final word to you, Amanda, given you've had this extremely difficult day.
I really do feel that you've got a stronger sense of your own importance and your own mission, and rather than you are not winning, as Piers says, you are not winning hearts and minds. All you're doing is antagonising and annoying and breaking the law. And that really is the reality of it. And for any other organisation and in any other country, as Piers says, we wouldn't tolerate it. And why we're doing it here, I really can't say.
Amanda,
I had a difficult day today.
I've got to leave it there. I'm so sorry for what you've been through today. My best to all your family.
Thank you.
And, I'm sure even in the 10 minutes you paid your mother a great tribute. What a life she led.
Thank you very
90
much.
years old. Amazing. Thank you both for coming in. Like I said at the start, I'm kind of with you ideologically. I'm just not with you about this kind of stuff.
Can we go and have a drink at some point and continue this conversation? 'Cause
Absolutely.
I think it's a lot bigger than this.
I think the conversation is important.
So
Conversation is
I think
important.
we'd both really love to
We'd like to
continue it
engage
with
in
you.
that.
All right. Good to see you both. Thank you very much. Well, I'm joined now by my peers back, TalkTV host Julia Hartley-Brewer, journalist Gillian Kleeman and Conservative author Douglas Murray. Douglas, let me start with you, because I can see you chomping at the bit over there in New York as you heard what was going down there. Your reaction to that debate?
Well, I mean, it's extraordinary. All of these Extinction Rebellions, Just Stop Oil and these groups, I mean, they just remind me of nothing so much as end-time cultists that we've experienced in Britain throughout our history. If you look at the diaries of Samuel Pepys, you had people in the 17th century whipping themselves, walking around the streets, and telling everyone that they were going to burn to death within a few years if they didn't confess their sins. I'm sorry, but everything I've heard from your guests earlier, apart from that poor woman who was not able to get to her mother's funeral, the people from Just Stop Oil, they just are end-time cultists. They tell us all we're going to burn. They are willing to do anything, no matter how disruptive, no matter how dangerous, simply to get their own way. And we heard it from their own mouths. They said, we don't have time for the democracy game. Well, I'm sorry, but what do we call people like this but extremists? Wild extremists who will do anything to pursue a goal which they're, frankly, among other things, wrong on. They're not just wrong tactically, they're wrong about the facts.
Gillian Kleeman, can you put up a defence for...
Well, I would say the Falun Gong have been meditating outside the Chinese embassy for 2 decades, and they don't get invited onto your show to talk for half an hour about their cause. Their tactics work. They have got the attention they want. They're protesting for a digital age, and they're getting their message out, and it's very effective. And I think,
But when you say the tactics work, I mean, they get on television because they do what many people think are puerile stunts, which sometimes have incredibly serious consequences. But I'm not sure they work in the sense of persuading people to join their cause. So how do they work?
Well, I think they anger the people around them when they're protesting, but their message goes far and wide. And this is how people protest when everybody's on Twitter and Facebook and Instagram. Their message goes far and wide, and perhaps it's not going to convince people who are already convinced. Perhaps it's not going to convince people who are staunchly for the other side. But there are lots of people who are making up their minds. And particularly at this time, after 2 incredibly hot days where records have been broken across the country, it seems like quite a smart tactic.
Yeah, but, I mean, Gillian, that's the point, isn't it? We've had 2 days. It was pretty extreme and a bit disconcerting that we've broken our records. But, like, if you take France, for example, they were having stuff like this back 20 years ago, which was equally horrific that
Still
summer.
alive.
And it goes on. And, I do not dispute for a moment that there's genuine climate change going on and the planet is heating up. I've seen enough evidence to prove that. My problem is, if we're going to try and deal with this, we've all got to come together. This kind of activity, it seems to me, has the opposite impact.
I thought we were going to start singing Kumbaya at that point. No, I think we should have a political debate about it. You've mentioned the point they're not trying to persuade people. They're very clear. I've spoken to enough of these protesters. They don't intend to persuade people. They want to bully people and threaten people and force people. They compare themselves to the suffragettes. The suffragettes had to resort to some violent tactics because they didn't have the vote. These people have the vote. They have the right to stand for election, to persuade us, cajole us and convince us with their facts. But they can't, because we don't believe them.
But playing devil's advocate, what if the politicians are not actually stepping up?
Well, then they themselves can stand for election. We did over Brexit. Politicians weren't
Their
doing what
argument
we
is that
wanted.
if all the top scientists, most of the top
No,
scientists...
it's not all. No, it's not, actually. It's not remotely all.
Most of the top...
Not even... I don't think
it is actually...
most who are willing to speak out. Most who are willing to speak out, because if you do speak out on the opposite side of the debate, then you simply lose your career.
Here's my point. If you're young and you're angry about what's going on, and you believe a lot of eminent scientists who say we are facing potential catastrophe, and you think your government is not stepping up, then what are you left to do?
You should stand for election. It's the idea that because people aren't listening, we have the right to stop other people going about their law-abiding business and to force governments to do something. They say we need a conversation. We talk incessantly about this issue.
Let's bring in Douglas,
Also, Piers, if I can say so, who are the people you would go to last for some long-term projections? I would have said people who'd been on the planet the least amount of time. We're talking here about people... We're talking here about people who don't know that it was hot in the 1970s in the summer. 1976 was a pretty hot summer. They have been told, they have whipped themselves up, a portion of this generation, into believing literally that they are going to burn to death within their lifetimes. They are lying to themselves and lying to other people. They are whipping themselves up into a fury. And here's the thing. There are actually consequences from the adults listening to the kids. Look what's happening in Germany and in France. Look at the dependency on Russian gas. Look at the way in which France and Germany, through short-termist, green-imbued policies, have ended up, firstly, being completely in hock to Vladimir Putin, and secondly, seeing what many of us said was going to be the consequence all along. Look at the German Green Party. That's one of these radical parties. Recently, they've had to admit, oh, we do need oil and gas. Then the next step they're going to have to do is, oh, we need nuclear. Yes, because that's what happens when you grow up and learn.
OK, let's bring in Jenny. I mean, you can see what's happening in Sri Lanka, for example, where the government came in and they tried to go down a very aggressive green policy route, and now you've got all hell breaking loose.
Well, that's because the economy is in a state. I would say that young people are the people who are going to have to live with the consequences of our inaction. That is the truth of it. They are.
I'm planning to live quite a long time.
Yes, but they're going to live longer than you. People who are younger than you will live longer.
I don't know the state of a lot of them.
And I think they have a right to feel very frustrated. There are a lot of vested interests in the world whose priority is not tackling climate change. We don't want to be dependent on countries that are quite grubby, countries like Saudi Arabia and Russia. We need to find alternative sources of energy for a variety of political reasons as well as environmental
reasons. Most people don't want to burn to death. Most people don't want to burn to death. They're not going to either. The problem here is we're talking about young kids who have been indoctrinated into an incredibly extreme ideology. As I say, we would have recognised them during the Protestant Reformation. We'd have recognised them during the Inquisition. These are people who believe they need to do anything to achieve their goals because they honestly believe they're going to go to hellfire in the next 6 months. All of their time trajectories keep on being proven wrong. All of their methodology does nothing but irritate the general public. And all of their claims about the speed with which we can get off fossil fuels are flat out wrong. I would listen to these people last.